Good morning.
Yeah.
Can we try to turn that up?
They may not hear us. You probably need to go into the
Oh,
no, you want to go into the microphone.
I can hear you.
oh, you guys can hear us, okay?
Yeah.
Can you see us?
We can.
So, the meeting is live streamed on YouTube, so we cannot start until 10 o'clock because that's when it officially starts, which is what, 1 minute away?
Sounds good.
Yeah. Right, it's 10.
All right, it's 10 o'clock. I want to thank everybody for being here with us. And for those of you that are on the city council, I want to thank you for doing that as well. The first thing that we'll do is we'll just do some introductions so people know who everyone is. I'm Sally Kramer. I'm the Deputy Director over Community-Based Corrections, but I'm also the Commissioner for the Adult Interstate Compact in Iowa. And I think just for ease, we'll do here first, and then we'll talk to the folks that are here virtually. You want to start, Simone?
Sure. I'm Simona Hammond. I'm the Deputy Compact Administrator for the Adult Compact. Work for DOC. Been doing this for about 11 years now.
Can you guys hear her okay? Okay, great.
I'm Bob Gass, the State Court Administrator.
Ryan Burke, Compact Specialist. Kelly Johnson, also Interstate Compact Specialist, and I focus on the rural side.
And I'm Mike McGuire. I work part-time in the Interstate Compact office.
Jennifer Giles, Assistant Deputy of Community-Based Corrections. Jen Rocky, Legislative Liaison. That's everybody that's in the room here. If you guys don't mind, that have joined us virtually, just to do a quick introduction. And I think if you're on the state council, you could say that as well. I should have said that to begin with. Bob Gass is part of the council. I'm present council. Someone is part of the council, and then we'll talk to people virtually.
I'll go first. I'm Kelly Ann Torres. I am the Deputy Compact Administrator for the Interstate Compact for Juveniles for Iowa, and part of the State Council.
Meredith, you want to go next?
Sure. I'm Meredith Lamberti. I'm Vice Chair of the Board of Parole, and I'm our representative for the council.
Thank you.
I'm Brian Losey. I'm state representative for House District 45.
Great. Thank you for being here.
I'm Melanie Summers Baller. I'm the Emmett County Attorney in Estherville, Iowa.
Thanks for being here.
Hi, good morning. My name is Laura Book. I'm the Corrections Policy Advisor for the Governor's Office.
Great. And then Jennifer Anderson is our IT support in case we have a problem. So thank you for hanging out with us for just a bit. We're going to go ahead and I'm going to turn it over to someone in Hammond. She is our Compact Administrator for Adult. And she is just going to give you a brief overview of what it is and what it is we want to cover today. We have she'll go into this more, but every 2 years she and I have to attend a national meeting to vote on new rules for compact that carry the weight of statute. So we wanted to cover those with you, hopefully explain those a little bit so that you could weigh in on how we should how we should do that vote. So go ahead, Mona.
Can you guys see my screen? Can you see the PowerPoint?
We can.
Great.
Okay. So the adult compact had a pretty busy year this year. Back in January, we came up with 22 new rule amendments proposals that after months of talking that got reduced to 20 new rule proposals. So I am going to go through the PowerPoint today and try to summarize what we will be voting on next month at the annual business meeting. I have listed the new rule proposals / amendments in order, but just wanted to mention that not all of them are going to significantly impact the way we do business. So I'm going to try to focus on the ones that actually imply or involve a lot of change. And if you have any questions as I go through it, I know I can talk about rule numbers and rules all day long. So if it doesn't make sense, please interrupt me. So the first, and to me, this is the more significant rule change, is actually a package, the absconding package that would affect 3 different rules. The first one is definition of an absconder, and then the second one would be the absconder violation report, and then the way the sending state retakes an absconder. So in terms of the definition of the absconder, the new rule proposal expands the definition, making a clear distinction between intentional avoiding of supervision and those clients who may have hardship or mitigating circumstances. So right now, the current definition says that to be an absconder, you have to not reside at the approved residence and avoid supervision. Well, different states look at this definition in different ways. So what we find ourselves is that some states, when a client misses one appointment and they pick up the phone and do a home visit and they cannot locate that client, then they automatically submit an absconder violation report. So this rule proposal would try to address that issue, and just recognize that somebody might be in the hospital or somebody might be in jail, so they're not able to report. So we're trying to avoid those situations. So it's talking about the absconder violation report, Rule 4.109. The biggest change is allowing for a 30-day investigation period before an absconder violation report is submitted. There are certain steps that are currently required, like a home visit, try to contact family members, but we see states do those steps in 2 days, and then we have a violation report, we have a warrant, and then the moment the sending state issues a warrant, the client is apprehended. So we're trying to avoid, again, those situations, and we all know that transportation costs have gone through the roof. So we just want to be mindful and verify if somebody's indeed an absconder or maybe has a situation that occurred that prevented that person from reporting. Another provision of this rule amendment, that 30-day investigation period is waived if we're talking about a client who has a high risk of violent behavior, somebody who might be on GPS and cut off the GPS. So the receiving state wouldn't have to wait 30 days before they could file a violation report. And also for the receiving state, and I heard a lot from our folks, it adds certain steps. It creates more work. But at the end of the day, we want somebody who is retaken as an absconder to be an absconder. And I think, I don't know, Kelly, if you want to add, we had situations where we got a violation report for a client absconding, but the client was in jail and his PO and the receiving state had no idea. So that's the kind of scenario that we want to avoid. Any questions on this?
I would say, Simona, that it helps formalize that 30-day period. We've got a good working relationship with a lot of states, and we've been able to do that from time to time. But this formalizes it or normalizes it to where it's an expectation, and hopefully we'll save every state a lot of headache and expense.
And I think this last absconding rule, the retaking of absconders 5.103, like Kelly said, we work really well. The majority of states work really well together, but we have a number of states, not to point any fingers, who would say, I cannot waive mandatory retaking, even though the client got arrested 2 days after you issue the warrant, because the compact rules don't allow us to. So this last rule, 5.103, that actually specifies that the receiving state and the sending state have the flexibility to agree on waiving that mandatory retaking. Again, this happens a lot nowadays, but I feel like this rule amendment is targeted towards 2 particular states who don't want to play nice.
We can't see people on the call, so if you have a question or want to say something, just say it. There's a way to show them in case they're raising their hands or wanting to ask something.
I think it would have been better if we had a different computer set up with Google Meet.
Those joining virtually, do you have any questions or thoughts or?
Can you guys still hear us?
We can hear you.
Okay.
There's a lot of head shaking when you asked if there were any questions or thoughts.
Okay.
Okay, sorry. The big TV has the PowerPoint on it, so we can't see the Google Meet. So just so you know that if you have questions, please ask. So moving on, again, the absconder package is the biggest change that we are going to vote on this year. Moving on to Rule Point 101, that is definition. The definition of a compact administrator, this is not a big change. So last year, the commission changed the term of offender to supervised individual. And at that time, the compact administrator definition changed to reflect that we're not using the term of offender, but supervised individual. Well, this year they realized that compact administrator is actually tied to each state statute. And that created a little bit of confusion. So they wanted to go back and recognize that. So again, not a major change, just language clarification on definition of a compact administrator. Relocate, revised definition. Currently, the definition of relocate says somebody living in the receiving state in a 12-month period. So that 45 consecutive day in a 12-month period, that led to different states looking at this relocate definition differently. So after talking to the legal counsel, they decided to eliminate any 12-month period language from the rule. Not a lot of changes, not going to impact how we do business. We're adding the definition of revocation just to add consistency across the board. We have 50 different states looking at revocation differently. Some states seem to think that bringing somebody in front of a judge for a status hearing is revocation. So that led to a lot of discussions nationwide, and receiving states invoking mandatory retaking if somebody would come back to the sending state for a status hearing. So we're adding this definition just to eliminate that confusion. And the ultimate goal is to prevent retaking and prevent disruption of a client's life whose resources are in the receiving state. We see a lot of going back and forth. Again, going back to the transport piece, we spend a lot of money for somebody to just been taken away from their home and job, go back to the sending state for a hearing. The case gets closed and then they have to start over and wait up to 45 days for a new transfer to be approved. Deferred sentences, just not a major change again, just clarification that if the underlying offense for a deferred sentence is a misdemeanor that doesn't qualify for a compact transfer, then it's not transferable. Right now, some people are under the impression that all the first sentences are subject to the compact, but that's not the case. So this rule amendment would clarify that piece. 2.110 clarifies what means when somebody violates the compact and relocates to the receiving state without permission. Just trying to think of a real life example. Somebody gets sentenced in Iowa, and for some reason they think they can go back to South Dakota because that's where their home is without going through the compact. So when the two states discover that the person is in South Dakota without permission, the current interpretation of the rule is that the client has to come back to Iowa. Iowa has to initiate the transfer process. The client has to stay in Iowa until South Dakota approves. Again, most states work together. We reach out, we talk, we agree to approving expedited reporting instructions, but we have a number of states who invoke the rules as a reason for that client to be removed from their state, just completely ignoring that their state is actually the home state of the client. So this rule would allow that flexibility for the two states to work together, which again, it already happens, but not across the board. Sex offender reporting instructions and transfers. This is a little bit of a change, not a major change. It's just taking the language for reporting instructions from sex offenders and just creating a new section for reporting instructions. It's basically makes more sense to, when you look at the rules, you want to see what qualifies for sex offender reporting instructions. You look at the section that's entitled reporting instructions for sex offenders. Right now, you kind of have to go through the rules and figure out where that section is. And the biggest piece on this one allows for remote sentencing of sex offenders, which already happened. We're not in a position to dictate how courts do their sentencing. So back in 2020, when COVID hit, a lot of states started doing remote sentencing. Well, for a sex offender, the current rules state that they cannot be in the receiving state until the receiving state approves reporting instructions or a transfer request. If the sentencing took place remotely and the client was never in the sending state, then it would make no sense for them to come back to the sending state and just wait for that request for reporting instructions. So the legal counsel weighed in at the time, but some states, again, don't play by the rules. So we initiated this rule amendment that would hopefully eliminate confusion and bring us all on the same page. (3.102) reporting instructions for individuals released in the receiving state. That is not a big change. That again, relocating the language from 3.102 that refers to the transfer request to a separate section for reporting instructions. This would apply to those clients who were paroled to a detainer in the receiving state, get released from incarceration in the receiving state, so they would qualify for what they call mandatory reporting instructions. Yeah, not a big change. That would just clarify the language and it would be easy to find. 3.103 mandatory reporting instructions for supervised individuals living in the receiving state at the time of sentencing. The biggest change to this rule is extending the period of submitting the request for reporting instructions from 7 days to 10 business days. So right now, somebody sentenced who is living in the receiving state, the day they got sentenced, have 7 business days for that request for reporting instructions to be submitted for the request to be mandatory, which makes no sense. If somebody's home is in the receiving state at the time of sentencing, they should be able to go home. Sometimes there's so many factors into play. Sometimes there's a delay from the paperwork getting to the probation office, and then the request being submitted in the system. So what we see, a small number of states, if you've missed that 7-day deadline, it's an automatic denial. So that creates hardship for the clients because they cannot be residing at their home while this transfer is pending. So that would clarify that piece. 3.104, not a huge change again. It just removes the provision that allows the withdrawal of an approval if somebody fails to report within 5 business days. So right now, once a transfer request is approved and the sending state submits a notice of departure, the client has 5 business days to report to the receiving state. We see a lot of confusion. Sometimes the client might not depart the day they told the PO they would. Life happens. So then the receiving state is in a position of withdrawing that acceptance. So this rule proposal would eliminate that, would clarify that if somebody doesn't report, you can, within 5 business days, you cannot withdraw that reply, that acceptance of a transfer request, and rather just focus on efforts of locating the client than revolving to a technical solution. 3.108, victims' right to be heard, and I know Mary's not here. She would probably have questions on this. Not a big change. It just clarifies that somebody transferring under the compact does not submit the transfer request. The current rule reads that the client goes in and submits a transfer request. That's actually not the case. It is the sending state probation parole office that does that step. And also just kind of specifies and clarifies that the victim has the right to submit their feedback to the transfer. That does not stop the transfer process, but then the sending state has to respond to the victim within 5 business days. This next rule amendment is just a title change only. I'm not gonna go through it. It's just moving and changing the title on travel permits to the sending state. Manner and degree of supervision 4.101 adds the requirement of documenting supervision activities. So somebody supervising the receiving state right now, the receiving state really has no obligation to let the sending state know and send documentation on their supervision progress or lack of. So this rule would require to show how they apply incentives or corrective actions and so on. (4.105) notice of arrivals and notice of departure. The current rule is not really specific on the time frame that a notice of departure needs to be submitted. We're all under the impression, but it's nowhere in writing, that the notice of departure cannot be submitted until the day that individual leaves the receiving state, the sending state. Again, life happens. If let's say somebody from an Iowa prison is released on a weekend, then that notice of departure is not going to be submitted until the following business day. So this rule amendment would allow for the sending state to submit the notice of departure up to 5 days prior to that departure. So that allows some flexibility, and it's actually in the rules that, you have 5 days to submit that. It didn't change, sorry. It did. 4.106, progress report, that's my favorite, and actually I might have had something to do with it. So back in 2016, the commission removed the requirement of an annual progress report. Right now, the sending state can request a progress report anytime. The receiving state has 30 days to respond. But what we found out is that we have a lot of cases that slipped through the cracks. And Kelly can attest to that. He's got about 500 parolees assigned to him. So the sending state relies on the receiving state to do their job. Well, in reality, that's not always the case. And I can see it on our side where Iowa PO supervising a dual case, an Iowa case and an out-of-state case. They do everything they're supposed to on the Iowa case, but then they do not inform the sending state on the out-of-state case. So I think this rule would require the annual progress reports that would be mandatory. So a supervising agent would have to go in once a year and inform the sending state of the progress or lack of on their clients. I think that would, for me, I think that would be a big piece on just making sure that we're consistent and we keep the sending state informed on the progress. Want to say something, Kelly?
I'm all for it. We will still have to check and make sure we are in fact getting it. But not in this case, we should be getting the majority of it now, as opposed to a very small amount.
And Simona, didn't you say that they are programming it too, so it'll notify like
Yes.
progress? So that'll help keep up on it as well.
So the system would send a notification that an annual progress report is due. That would allow us in the compact office to pull reports and send out reminders and make sure that it happens. I think my biggest worry, and it's not even a worry, but I get really irritated when we do such a good job on supervising Iowa cases and documentation and ICON and everything. And when I go into ICOTS, there is nothing. We had a client who had been an absconder for a year. We had a warrant on the Iowa case. The sending state, the out-of-state case, they had no idea. So we're just, yeah, it makes us look bad, and it's just a responsibility. We're responsible for that client, and we're supervising the client on behalf of the other state. So we're just only doing half the job. So. Let's see next. 4.101, supervised individuals returning to the sending state. Not a huge change, but right now, when somebody transferred on the compact, they want to return to the sending state, they can. So the sending state cannot say no. They have that right. So this rule would clarify that the return can be initiated by the client itself, can be initiated by the sending state. The sending state can always order somebody back. The receiving state cannot order somebody back to the sending state, even though they try to every day. So. (4.112) closing supervision by the receiving state. It just simplifies the language in the current rule and adds a section where, let's see if I'm able to articulate that. Somebody supervising the receiving state who transfers to a third state. So once they're transferred to the third state as approved, then the receiving state can close interest. It's just more of a technicality. It would allow for a section that the receiving state can close interest when the client leaves their state and goes not back to the sending state, but to a third state. So. This one is going to be a big change, and I think long term is going to help save money when it comes to retaking. 5.101-2 discretionary process for disposition of a violation in the sending state when a client picks up a new felony conviction in the receiving state. So this would allow for the sending state to conduct a remote hearing. Can be over the phone, can be Zoom, as long as the client and their attorney agrees to it. And if the sentence imposed by the receiving state partially or fully satisfies the sentence that the sending state would impose, then the sending state doesn't have to retake. So somebody in prison in Iowa who has an out-of-state case, so while supervised on the out-of-state case, they picked up a conviction that landed them in prison in Iowa. Instead of the sending state retaking them, they can do that hearing, and as long as it's the Iowa prison sentence is satisfactory, then they cannot, they don't have to go back to that state. They can just stay in Iowa. When released, the Iowa PA would supervise them on the out-of-state case as well.
So Simone, if you can give an example, so let's say right now somebody goes to prison in Iowa, but they've got this detainer for the other state. Figure out those detainers when they finish their sentence in Iowa, and that would help eliminate some of that confusion.
Right.
Expense.
Right, provided the sending state agrees to do that hearing and not place the detainer. So the detainers, majority of the cases, compact cases anyways, are what they call mandatory retaking. So it's the current rules require a sending state to retake if a new felony or violent crime conviction occurred.
So Iowa could save a lot of money too, in that if we've got somebody that's doing a prison sentence in Illinois, rather than Illinois is not bad because it doesn't cost as much to bring them back, but it still costs money. As long as we could have that hearing that everybody agrees to, then we don't have to pay to bring them back to do the exact same thing, give them credit for time served.
Right. Probable cause hearing 5.108. So probable cause hearing is actually part of their due process. Supreme Court rulings from back in the 70s that state that supervised individual client is entitled to a hearing in the proximity where the violation occurred. So if somebody violates in Iowa and they're from Illinois, they're entitled to that hearing in Iowa prior to Illinois taking them to their state. The current rule doesn't have a time frame. So you have clients sitting in jail, sending state requesting a probable cause hearing, and then the receiving state dragging their feet or not knowing what to do. And we're looking at violation of due process. You can't keep somebody in jail without a hearing for a long time. So the rule amendment would impose a 30-day period for the receiving state to conduct a probable cause hearing from the moment the sending state requests it. The next rule is 5.107, and a new rule. These are just taking a bunch of the current rules regarding responsibilities and who's responsible for what when retaking a client and consolidating them into a new rule. Nothing changes as far as the language. It's just all over the place right now. It's kind of organizing the rule. Shall I play the song? And that's what the rule amendments are for this year. Again, Sally will have to vote on them next year. Oh yeah, I was gonna play the song. So we have an Interstate Compact song written by AI. I tried to take credit for it, but that kind of didn't work. It's catchy but annoying, so I'm not gonna play it for you folks.
But just with some background, and we want to hear your comments, and if you want to think about things and share that. The way this works is this is kind of a 2-year process where staff in the field often bring forward ideas of things that they think would make it better. And then we have region meetings as the Midwest, South, North, what have you. And in those region meetings, they talk about these rules. The thought is that, they should be getting input and talking to folks about if this is a good rule or not. And so we just wanted to make you guys aware of these proposed rules, give you a chance to kind of dig into it a little bit. The meeting is the end of September, so we've got a little bit of time if you've got some input about some things that is concerning. But we wanted to, it's a lot. These are a lot, but they really, I think we feel pretty good about them, but we also want to make sure we're not making any unintended consequences. So we wanted to get your input as well. So did anybody have anything that was concerning? And if you need to think about it for a little bit, or if you have questions, please feel free to email us back or call or whatever.
Okay. I think next on the agenda is Kellyanne.
Yes. The juvenile compact is also in their, also in a voting year for our rule proposals as well. So I have just a couple to present to you guys. We didn't have a big rulemaking cycle this year. So most of ours are smaller changes. And I think they were included in the agenda. But I'll go ahead and start. So our first rule change is actually an addition to our definitions. And it's Rule 1-101, but it would be adding a definition of human trafficking into our rules. This proposal was submitted by the East Region. Right now, as a commission as a whole, we are working a lot on non-delinquent runaways and returning those non-delinquent youth. And many of those we see are involved in human trafficking. So the East Region is proposing that we add a definition for human trafficking into our rules. We don't have any other rules that really address human trafficking. So this definition is really just more of a clarification to help in some data gathering that we do through our Unity system. It won't affect any other rules, and there'll be no system impacts or form impacts and no fiscal impact from this rule. Our second rule proposal is 4-102, and this is language to our sending and receiving referrals rule. This really is mostly just some grammatical changes and then some clarification changes to the language. So right now, when we have a youth that is on parole and they are relocating before our home evaluation has been approved and the transfer's been accepted, the youth is required to have a travel permit sent with that referral packet. And that was a change to a rule that we had in our last cycle that required travel permits be sent anytime a transfer supervision packet is sent. So the language change in this rule just clarifies that that includes these paroled youth, because right now the rule language reads that if the sending state deems it's appropriate, they can send a travel permit, which is in conflict to our travel permit rule that was changed in our last cycle. It also requires that the complete referral be submitted to the receiving state within 10 business days of submitting that travel permit. So the travel permit goes first, and then that referral has to be completely submitted within 10 business days. Right now, that would impact our system, our Unity system, which is our case tracking system. The time frame on that system is 10 days after the juvenile arrives in the receiving state. So this would just change that time frame from 10 business days after the Form 7, the travel permit, was submitted to the receiving state. And this would have, we would have to do some work on our Unity system. None of our forms would have to change. So there is some fiscal impact to this rule. And I'll provide the costs to those as well. So the estimated cost to update the system based off of this rule change is $10,800. I will say that all of our rule impacts, fiscal impacts, are within the budget that the commission has for this year. So there's no budget concerns with these fiscal impacts. We also had some changes to our 4-103, which is our transfer supervision for juvenile sex offenders. And again, some grammatical changes, capitalization issues. And then it also aligned the travel permit section of this rule to meet what we changed in our 2024 cycle, that the travel permit needs to be sent prior to the juvenile's departure, and then that the full referral has to be done within 10 business days of submitting that travel permit. There's also some language changes in here that clarify who's monitoring that youth while they're in the receiving state before the acceptance. That it's still the sending state is still responsible for that youth, but while the youth is there, that receiving state will ensure that they monitor the juvenile's compliance with local like registration laws and requirements. Again, no form impacts with this rule. The Unity system would have to be updated to change that 10 business day timeframe from when the juvenile arrives to when the Form 7 is submitted. And the same fiscal cost for that change is the $10,800. I will note that our rules committee supports all of these proposals except for the human trafficking definition, and that in discussions with Commissioner Hamstra, he's also in support of these. So if you guys have any questions, make sure you stop me and I'll address those too as we're going through. Our next proposal change was to 4-104, which is our authority to accept or deny supervision. And this is actually a proposal that came out of the Midwest region. This proposed change is that during the home evaluation process, if a receiving state is unable to provide any of the conditions of supervision that are imposed on the juvenile by the sending state, that information has to be included in the home evaluation that goes back to the sending state. And this is really so that states can determine if the relocation is going to be in the best interest or if they need to make any adjustments to their conditions of supervision before the juvenile relocates. The inability to provide any services does not allow for the denial of supervision. So it's not changing any of our denial requirements. It really is just making sure that the receiving state's providing all of the information to the sending state on what can and cannot be provided to that juvenile if they were to relocate. This would have both a Unity impact and a form impact. We would be adding a section to our home evaluation form so that that information can be documented in its own section so that it's not missed. And there would be a $13,500 fiscal impact for this rule. Our next rule proposal is on 5-103A, which is our failed supervision determined by receiving state. This proposal just changes the language of that title to mandatory relocation, and then it adjusts anywhere failed supervision was in the rule, it would add mandatory relocation. This situation doesn't happen very often in the juvenile world, but this would be like if a juvenile were in supervision on another state and that supervision had failed and that juvenile needed to be relocated. So the rule allows for the juvenile to relocate to another home within that state or to have to return to the home state. There was also some deletion of the language regarding if the youth is in detention currently, not being able to submit that failed supervision to the sending state. We removed that language as a lot of times these youth are placed in detention because there's no other safe place for them to go pending that relocation. So the update would change it from failed supervision to mandatory relocation and then allow that process to begin even if that juvenile was in detention as long as they were eligible for release. And then our next rule proposal is on Rule 6-102, which is our voluntary return rule for runaways, absconders, escapees, and accused delinquents. And this is really just striking some language that has caused some confusion for many years and clarify who is responsible for making the return arrangements for the juvenile. So right now, the section that's being stricken is the home or demanding state shall be responsible to the holding state's court orders and affecting the return of its juveniles. And what will be left to help clarify is that each ICJ office shall have policies and procedures in place involving the return of juveniles that will ensure the safety of the public and the juveniles. It is always the home and demanding state's responsibility to work with whomever is responsible for that youth to return that youth. And then our final proposal is another proposal to our travel permit rule, which is 8-101. And this just names the specific form that has to be used for a travel permit. The commission has an approved form for travel permits. It's our Form 7 out-of-state travel permit and agreement to return. So this just clarifies that that is the form that has to be used when submitting a travel permit. And that really is it for our rule proposals. Again, nothing that myself or Commissioner Hamstra were concerned with, but welcome any feedback from the State Council. We vote on those rules the end of August, the end of August, so just in a couple of weeks. So if you guys have any questions or comments or concerns, I'd be happy to take those and address them or hear them. Nothing. Okay. If you think
I have a question. Is there an effective date for these rules if they pass?
Yep. So our effective date is like spring of 2026. April, I believe, is when they would go into effect.
That is the same for the adult compact. So what passes would become effective on April 1st, 2026. Obviously, a lot of training involved, but I think we're ready.
Great, thank you. I think the last piece that we wanted to cover is just an open discussion about what it is you as part of State Council would like from the staff. Would you like us to send more frequent updates? Would you like to meet more often? What is your level of involvement that you would like to have? We do have a lot of, I shouldn't say a lot, we do have some issues that crop up from time to time. So when the legislature changed this council to more of an advisory role, the benefit of it that I did like was that they allowed us to choose people to be on this board. And so you'll notice that with somebody from the county attorney's office, we thought it was really important for you to have a voice because, you know, a lot of things impact you. Obviously, the judicial branch is important, legislators, board parole. We have a victim advisory person who's actually in our office. She wasn't able to be here today, but we've worked with her on all of these items. We had someone from the sheriff's office. They were not able to be here today, but we'll send that out to them because their budgets are impacted by these rules and at times in taking them and whatnot. But having said all that, again, we just wanted to know what would be helpful for you to have the information that you need with these meetings. We're required by compact to meet once a year. And that's what this group has opted to do since I've been here. I've been here about 10 years, I think. But there's many states that meet more often than that, and they have a lot more dialogue than that. I'm not telling you that you have to do that, but I do want to make sure you guys feel like you have the information and the things that you need to be able to provide feedback and input. I'll just turn it out for open discussion.
We also have a lot of compliance reports and the fiscal year that I thought and I would like to send to you guys, but I just don't want to, everybody's busy, but that kind of shows where we place nationwide and just highlights the work that we do here in the compact office. So if there's interest in that, I can definitely make sure that I can email it to you.
And I'll add that the juvenile compact has, like, we do an annual report every year as well that I'm happy to share with you guys once that comes out. And then we are working on some compliance reports too. So once those get up and running and have been fully released, if you all want to see the juvenile side of things, let me know and I can make sure that we get those shared out as well.
I will say that it's a little hard to comment on the rule changes that you're proposing because all of this is new to us. So I guess the question I have is, can you email us those proposed changes so we have a chance to look through them and digest it a little bit to see whether we have any questions or comments? I don't have any right now because it's just, I'm thinking of a lot of things rolling around in my head as to, you know, how practically these things are going to look like. So if you could email us those proposed changes, I would be grateful.
I can do that.
Yeah, happy to do that.
Thank you.
I think the only other thing that I want to add is that we have a very small, compact office, and they just do a tremendous amount of work. We've never made, I shouldn't call this the naughty list. We've always been in compliance, and we have a lot of states that aren't in compliance. I happen to chair the compliance committee for the nation, and I have a meeting after this where we'll have to deal with some of those issues. So I do think that I just want you all to be aware of that. If this office didn't have the work ethic and the good relationships with stakeholders and people in the community, we would find ourselves on that list. So those being on that list is not a good thing because you're subject to fines, and we'll be levying some fines for states most likely today. So again, they keep us out of trouble. They help us, you know, do what we need to do. So I just want to tell you, thank you guys for all your hard work. All right. Well, would it be helpful, again, you don't want to add to your email list or your emails, because I know everybody that's here is busy. But we'll obviously send those out. Please send us any concerns or feedback. Would it be helpful if after the conference, if we sent a summary of what happened, and then you can read it or not? We're happy to get everybody back together if that would be better. What would you guys prefer?
I would say that would be helpful.
I would agree. Someone would be.
Yeah, this is a summary, and then if you have questions, we can get folks together. Is this time of year a good time to meet? It's not great because it doesn't give you a lot of time to ask questions before we go to our national meeting. But then I also know for some of you that are busy with the session, it's such a busy time during the session that that's difficult as well.
I'd say we're going to argue with you that we're always busy, right? But but I think this time is fine. I don't think that there's a really a time of year where we're going to be sitting around saying, I'm bored. What do I need to do now? So
totally agree. Well, I think what we'll do is we'll just err on the side of sending you things, and you can delete it if you don't feel it's pertinent. And then if you want more communication or you have questions, we can go from there. We'll schedule another meeting, approximately a year from now. And if you guys want to meet before that, we are certainly happy to do that. I don't need to speak for juvenile office, but that's the adult office. Yeah.
The juvenile office is happy to meet whenever. We have the same compact requirements of meeting once a year. And I don't know, for me personally, as long as we're meeting before our annual business meeting, that works out really well because then I can get some input to carry over. And we will be as flexible as needed. So whatever you need from us, we're happy to help.
I guess the other thing I would say is if if it's going to be a consistent thing to have proposed rule changes, every time we meet, if we could have those ahead of time so that when we do meet, then we have a chance to digest what you're proposing ahead of time so that when we meet together, we've had a chance to review the material and can have, more of a discussion than maybe afterwards and emailing.
Absolutely.
Just
Yep, no, that's a good suggestion. We'll certainly do that. So I think what I'm hearing is we'll do the once a year meeting unless we hear differently from you. After both of us go to our compact meetings, we'll send an update, an overview of what happened, and any other information that we feel will be helpful for you to know. And then maybe like in the spring, we'll send you just just how things are going, just so you have an idea. And, open up for dialogue too. And of course, if, the County Attorney Association or the judges or whomever have issues, don't wait, just reach out. We're happy to assist in whatever we can. Okay. Anything else? Thanks again. I know you're all busy. Appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.